What if the truth about a man's innocence was hidden inside the eyes of a loyal dog? What if a final request before execution unlocked a secret that could expose corruption, crime, and betrayal? This is not just a story. It's a revelation. Daniel sat quietly on the edge of his prison bed, staring at the gray walls that had been his world for the last 7 years. The clock ticked slowly, each second pulling him closer to the inevitable. Most men in his position begged for a lavish final meal, a desperate phone call to family, or even the presence of a priest. But Daniel stunned the guards with something entirely different. His voice was steady, almost calm, when he spoke. "I don't want a feast. I don't want a call. I just want to see Max, my dog." The request spread like wildfire across the prison. Some guards laughed, others frowned in disbelief. A final request for a dog? It sounded absurd. Yet to Daniel, it wasn't absurd at all. 7 years ago, before the night that changed everything, Max was his only companion, the one being who never judged, never abandoned, and never betrayed him. When the world turned against Daniel, Max had remained faithful. That bond, unbroken by bars and years, was now his last connection to life. But the warden and the officers were divided. Allowing a dog inside a maximum security prison wasn't a small decision. Security risks, protocols, and potential chaos all weighed heavily in their debates. The yard wasn't built for sentimental goodbyes. Still, Daniel had built a reputation inside those walls. No fights, no infractions, no escape attempts. He wasn't the violent criminal his file painted him to be. He was quiet, respectful, and oddly hopeful, almost as if he knew something others didn't. His unusual request forced the prison staff to pause. Behind closed doors, whispers grew louder. Why a dog? Why now? Some officers felt there was more to it than just loyalty. And one man, Officer Jenkins, seemed especially uneasy. He had been there on the night Daniel was arrested, yet strangely, his name never appeared in the trial records. He avoided eye contact each time the request was mentioned, as if Max's presence threatened more than prison rules. Daniel, meanwhile, sat patiently. His eyes had once been sharp with defiance, but time had softened them into something else: regret, reflection, and a faint spark of hope. He had nothing left to lose, yet somehow he still carried the weight of someone fighting for truth. When Ramirez, a younger guard known for his empathy, delivered the warden's tentative approval, Daniel whispered just 2 words under his breath: "Thank you." The date was set. Max would be brought in under strict supervision. Daniel would have a few short minutes with the only soul who never gave up on him. But none of them, not the guards, not the warden, not even Daniel himself, could have predicted that this reunion would shake the very foundation of the prison, unravel years of lies, and expose a hidden truth buried beneath badges and files. The request wasn't just about loyalty, it was about justice, and the world was about to see why. The prison staff debated late into the evening. Bringing a dog into a maximum security facility was not only unusual, but risky. There were strict rules in place for good reason, and no one wanted to be the one responsible if something went wrong. Yet Daniel's behavior during his years behind bars spoke volumes. He had never raised his voice, never started a fight, and never attempted an escape. For someone condemned, he had shown remarkable discipline and restraint. The warden studied Daniel's file carefully, flipping through page after page of reports that marked him as cooperative and compliant. Compared to other inmates, Daniel was almost invisible. He lived quietly, worked steadily, and rarely asked for anything. His request to see Max was the only unusual entry in 7 long years of silence. That detail was hard to ignore. Still, the warden hesitated. The risks were real. But at the same time, there was something almost humanizing about the idea. A man facing the end, not begging for more food or comfort, but simply longing to see his dog one last time. After hours of consideration, the decision was made. Daniel's request would be granted. The visit would be short, strictly supervised, and tightly controlled. Word of the approval spread quickly through the prison corridors. Some guards shook their heads in disbelief, muttering that the warden was being too soft. Others shrugged it off, curious to see how the moment would unfold. But not everyone reacted the same way. Officer Jenkins was different. The news seemed to unsettle him more than anyone else. His jaw tightened each time Max's name was mentioned, and his eyes darted away whenever other officers spoke about the reunion. Jenkins had been on the arresting team the night Daniel was taken in, yet he never openly discussed that night. His silence, once unnoticed, now seemed heavier. Ramirez, the younger guard who had delivered the news to Daniel, noticed Jenkins' behavior. Something about it didn't sit right. Why would the presence of a dog bother him so much? Ramirez filed the thought away but kept his eyes open. Meanwhile, Daniel received the news with quiet gratitude. He didn't smile, but the relief in his expression was unmistakable. For him, the reunion wasn't about spectacle or pity, it was about closure. He wanted to kneel down, hold Max's fur, and for just a few minutes, feel what freedom had once meant. The arrangements began immediately. A secure area in the yard was selected, guards were assigned, and strict instructions were handed down. Every step would be monitored. Every second would be timed. But even with all the preparation, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Some of the staff couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting would be more than just a farewell. It carried a weight none of them fully understood. And as the day approached, the quiet prison began to hum with anticipation, an undercurrent of tension that seemed to grow stronger with every passing hour. The morning of the visit arrived with an unusual stillness. Inside the prison yard, a section had been cleared and surrounded by watchful guards. Every corner was checked twice, every gate secured. This wasn't just another day, it felt like the calm before a storm. Daniel stood quietly as the guards escorted him into the yard. His steps were heavy, yet his heart beat faster with each one. 7 years. 7 years of stone walls, steel doors, and silence. And now finally he was about to see the only soul that had never abandoned him. The gate opened. A handler walked in with Max on a leash. The dog's fur was a little grayer, his movements slower, but his eyes were the same. The moment Max saw Daniel, the leash became useless. He bolted forward with a bark that broke the silence. Daniel dropped to his knees. For the first time in years, his arms didn't feel chained. They felt alive as he wrapped them around Max. Tears blurred his vision as Max licked his face, tail wagging furiously. The prison yard, the guards, the cold stares, everything faded. In that moment, it was just Daniel and Max, as if time itself had been waiting for them to reunite. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Some looked away, uncomfortable with the raw display of emotion. Others softened, realizing this was more than just a prisoner and a pet. It was loyalty in its purest form. Daniel buried his face in Max's fur, whispering words only the dog could hear. Memories flashed before him, the long nights Max had kept him company. The way the dog had slept by the door when Daniel's world was falling apart. The moments of laughter and warmth that no one else had given him. But the joy didn't last long. Suddenly, Max's body stiffened. His tail dropped, his ears shot up, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. Daniel pulled back, confused. Max's gaze was fixed, sharp, unwavering, on one of the guards standing near the fence. It was Officer Jenkins. The growl grew louder, deepening into a bark that echoed across the yard. Max lunged forward, straining against Daniel's hold, teeth bared, eyes locked on Jenkins. The guards moved quickly, tightening formation, but Daniel held Max back, his own heartbeat thundering in his chest. Jenkins tried to wave it off, muttering, "It's just a dog. They bark at anything." But his face was pale and his eyes darted nervously. Ramirez, standing nearby, didn't miss it. Neither did Daniel. In that instant, Daniel knew Max wasn't just reacting out of fear or instinct. Dogs remember. They recognize scents, voices, and faces. Max wasn't confused. He was certain. And his certainty pointed straight at Jenkins. Daniel's mind raced. He thought back to his arrest, the hurried trial, the evidence that had never quite made sense. Pieces began to click together, fueled by Max's reaction. This wasn't just loyalty. This was recognition, and recognition meant truth. The yard, once filled with emotion, now felt charged with tension. Guards whispered among themselves. Jenkins shifted uncomfortably under their stares. Ramirez's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering like a flame. Daniel tightened his grip on Max, but he didn't try to quiet him. Instead, he looked at Jenkins with a calm intensity that unsettled everyone around them. For 7 years, Daniel had carried the weight of guilt for a crime he swore he didn't commit. And now, in the final hours of his life, his dog had just pointed toward a secret no one else had dared to see. The reunion was no longer just about farewell. It had become the spark of something larger, something dangerous, something criminal. And in that spark, Daniel saw the faintest glimpse of hope. The prison yard still buzzed with the echo of Max's growls. Guards shifted uneasily, pretending not to notice the tension, but their eyes betrayed curiosity. Jenkins tried to steady his composure, adjusting his uniform, but the cracks were showing. His hand twitched slightly at his side, and his jaw clenched as if he could force the moment to disappear. Daniel, still kneeling beside Max, didn't take his eyes off Jenkins. He felt the weight of those growls deep in his chest. This wasn't random. Dogs didn't bark at shadows. They barked at truths hidden from human eyes. Ramirez stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Daniel could hear. "Your dog doesn't like him, huh?" Daniel kept stroking Max's back, his voice calm but deliberate. "No," Max remembers. "Dogs don't forget who hurt their family." Ramirez froze for a second, the words sinking in. His gaze flicked toward Jenkins, who stood stiffly, avoiding everyone's eyes. Ramirez had always trusted his instincts, and right now, they were screaming at him that something wasn't right. Later that evening, when the yard cleared and Daniel was escorted back to his cell, Ramirez couldn't let the thought go. Jenkins's reaction hadn't been normal. He wasn't annoyed, he was rattled. And that was enough to plant a seed of suspicion. Inside the guard's office, Ramirez pulled up Daniel's old case file. He skimmed through page after page, the crime scene photos, the so-called evidence, the testimony that sealed Daniel's fate. Something was off. Jenkins' name appeared only once, listed as a patrol officer, not directly tied to the investigation. Yet, Daniel had mentioned earlier that Jenkins was present during the arrest. Why would an officer downplay his own involvement? The more Ramirez read, the more questions arose. Daniel's conviction had been swift, too swift. The evidence had fallen into place like pieces of a puzzle designed to fit. But when examined closely, the edges didn't align. There were inconsistencies in the timeline, unexplained fingerprints, and a witness statement that seemed unusually vague. Back in his cell, Daniel couldn't shake the image of Max lunging at Jenkins. He replayed the night of his arrest in his mind, the chaos, the flashing lights, the accusations. He remembered Jenkins' face back then, stern, cold, but oddly desperate. It was the same look he wore in the yard today. The following day, Ramirez took a risk. During his rounds, he paused at Daniel's cell. "Tell me the truth," Ramirez said quietly. "Was Jenkins really there the night you were arrested?" Daniel's eyes locked on him, steady and unblinking. "Yes, he was the first one through the door. He searched my place, and when he came out, suddenly there was evidence they had never found before. I knew it didn't belong to me." Ramirez exhaled slowly. It confirmed what his gut had already whispered. Jenkins hadn't just been present. He might have been the key player in the setup, but suspicion alone wasn't enough. Ramirez needed proof, and proof was dangerous to pursue inside a prison where rank and loyalty often protected the wrong people. Still, something in Max's growls echoed in his mind. Animals didn't lie. As the days passed, Ramirez started digging quietly. He asked subtle questions, rechecked old logs, and noticed small irregularities that pointed back to Jenkins. Every detail added weight to his suspicion. Every silence screamed louder than words. For Daniel, hope was something he had buried long ago. But now, with Max's instinct and Ramirez's curiosity, a new thread had appeared. And in a place where every truth was buried under concrete and steel, even the smallest thread could unravel everything. The suspicion had begun, and it was only a matter of time before it turned into discovery. Days passed, but the tension inside the prison didn't fade. If anything, it grew sharper. The guards might not have spoken openly, but everyone had noticed Max's reaction to Jenkins. Whispers traveled through the corridors, carried like smoke, impossible to contain. Ramirez, however, refused to let it become just another rumor. He began to quietly test Jenkins, asking casual questions, pretending to be curious about the old arrest. At first, Jenkins answered with the confidence of a seasoned officer, brushing off details and sticking to official lines. But soon, small cracks appeared. One afternoon in the break room, Ramirez leaned casually against the counter. "You were part of Daniel's arrest, right?" he asked. Jenkins froze for half a second before replying. "Yeah, I was around. Just routine work. Nothing special." The pause was short, almost invisible, but Ramirez caught it. He had seen enough interrogations to know when a man was forcing control. Later, Ramirez checked old duty logs. Jenkins had been marked as off shift the night of Daniel's arrest. Yet, in Daniel's memory, Jenkins was not only present but leading the search of his home. That contradiction gnawed at Ramirez like a loose thread begging to be pulled. Meanwhile, Daniel sensed the shift too. Each time Jenkins passed his cell block, Max's reaction replayed in his mind. The memory of those growls burned brighter than any courtroom testimony. "Dogs don't forget," he whispered to himself, gripping the edge of his bed as though clinging to the only truth he had left. The pressure on Jenkins began to show. He grew short-tempered, snapping at junior officers for minor mistakes. He avoided eye contact during routine checks and often volunteered for shifts away from Daniel's block, as if physical distance could erase suspicion. But the more he avoided, the more attention he drew. One night, Ramirez sat with the warden, sliding a copy of the duty log across the desk. "Look at this. Jenkins wasn't even supposed to be there that night." The warden frowned. "Then why was his name missing from the trial records altogether?" Silence hung between them. Both men understood what that could mean, but neither spoke it aloud. If Jenkins had hidden his presence and tampered with evidence, Daniel's conviction wasn't just flawed, it was poisoned. Back in his cell, Daniel waited, unaware of the details but sensing the storm building around him. Every glance from Ramirez carried an unspoken promise. The truth was getting closer. And outside those prison walls, Max rested quietly, unaware of the human games of power and lies. Yet it was his instinct, his growl, that had cracked the first layer of Jenkins' carefully built armor. The cracks were spreading, and soon, something would break. The tension that had been building for weeks finally broke when the warden called Jenkins into his office. The meeting was brief but heavy. Jenkins was asked a single question that shook the walls of his carefully built facade. "Why didn't you report your presence at Daniel's arrest?" Jenkins hesitated. For the first time, his words didn't come smoothly. He muttered something about just being nearby and helping out, but the explanation sounded weak, even to his own ears. The warden dismissed him with a cold stare, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt had sprouted into full suspicion. That same evening, Ramirez pushed deeper. He requested access to archived files, documents that had been buried under years of paperwork. Hours of searching paid off when he stumbled across a report from a neighbor near Daniel's home. The witness had claimed to see a man leaving the house before police arrived. The description was vague at the time and was dismissed as unreliable. But when Ramirez compared the details, the height, the build, the walk, it aligned disturbingly well with Jenkins. The next day, Ramirez confronted Daniel quietly during rounds. "We found a witness," he whispered through the bars. "They saw someone leave your place before the arrest. The description, it matches Jenkins." Daniel gripped the bars tightly, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and hope. "I told them I was innocent. I told them. He set me up." For years, Daniel's words had been ignored, his voice drowned out by the weight of fabricated evidence. But now, his truth was resurfacing, carried by the instinct of a dog and the persistence of a guard, unwilling to look away. The warden ordered the case to be reopened. A quiet investigation began, hidden from most of the prison staff. Files were re-examined, forensic evidence rechecked, and testimonies re-evaluated. What emerged was more than just inconsistency, it was proof. The fingerprints that had once condemned Daniel were discovered to be planted. DNA samples had been mishandled, pushed through the system too quickly to allow for proper verification. And most damning of all, new analysis revealed traces of Jenkins' prints on items supposedly found inside Daniel's home. The puzzle was no longer scattered. It was coming together with frightening clarity. Meanwhile, Jenkins grew increasingly paranoid. He avoided conversations, skipped breaks, and kept to himself. But paranoia has a way of making a man sloppy. His temper flared during routine checks, his explanations grew shorter, and his nervous glances became impossible to hide. Other officers noticed. Some began to whisper that Jenkins wasn't just hiding something, he was guilty of something bigger. When confronted again, Jenkins tried to deny everything. But denial crumbled when the neighbor who had once stayed silent agreed to testify formally. The witness described the night in detail. The sound of footsteps, the shadow of a man leaving Daniel's home, the glint of a badge on his belt. That badge had belonged to Jenkins. The warden knew then there was no going back. He contacted the higher authorities, halting Daniel's execution indefinitely. For the first time in 7 years, Daniel's life was no longer running out. It was being reconsidered. In his cell, Daniel sat in silence, his hand resting against the cold floor. Max's growl that moment in the yard echoed in his mind. His loyal companion had done what no lawyer, no courtroom, and no appeal had managed to do. He had opened the door to the truth. The hidden truth was no longer hidden. It was breaking free, ready to tear down the lies that had stolen Daniel's life. The prison, once a place of silence and routine, buzzed with whispers. News of the investigation spread through corridors like wildfire. Inmates leaned against cell doors. Guards exchanged quick glances, and even those who usually ignored Daniel now looked at him differently. Something was happening. Something big. Daniel sat quietly in his cell, Max resting at his side. For years, he had carried the unbearable weight of being labeled a criminal. Every night, he replayed the moment of his arrest, the trial, the verdict. And every night he told himself he would never see justice. But now, for the first time in 7 years, hope wasn't just a dream. It was real, knocking at the gates. The warden summoned Daniel for an official meeting. As Daniel entered the room, he noticed the atmosphere was unlike anything he had experienced before. No hostility, no indifference, just cautious respect. The warden leaned forward. Your execution is suspended. The case has been reopened. New evidence points to corruption in your conviction. Daniel's hands trembled. He wanted to shout, to cry, to demand why it had taken so long, but instead, he whispered one word. Max. The warden gave a brief nod. Yes, it started with him. Meanwhile, Jenkins' world collapsed. He was questioned, pressed for answers, and cornered by mounting evidence. His denials grew weaker with each passing day. Colleagues who once trusted him now avoided his gaze. The badge that once gave him power became a symbol of his betrayal. The final blow came when the neighbor testified officially, recounting the night Jenkins was seen leaving Daniel's home. Combined with forensic reports and the contradictions in duty logs, the truth became undeniable. Jenkins had planted the evidence that condemned Daniel. He had orchestrated the entire frame-up, hiding behind his uniform. When the charges against Daniel were dropped, the prison gates opened for him. Not as a condemned man, but as a free one. The world outside felt overwhelming, the air sharper, the sky brighter. But what mattered most was waiting at the edge of the crowd, Max. The dog leapt forward, barking joyfully, his tail wagging so hard it looked ready to break. Daniel fell to his knees, burying his face in Max's fur. This wasn't just freedom, it was rebirth. Every tear that rolled down his cheek carried away the years of pain and injustice. Reporters swarmed, flashing cameras, shouting questions. Headlines would soon dominate every screen. Dog exposes corrupt cop, innocent man freed after 7 years. But for Daniel, the noise didn't matter. What mattered was that Max had never given up on him. Even when the world turned against Daniel, even when evidence screamed guilt, even when hope was a dying ember, Max's loyalty never wavered. That loyalty had become the key to truth. Jenkins, now disgraced and arrested, was led away in handcuffs. The irony was bitter. The man who had once dragged Daniel into prison now walked the same path, stripped of authority, branded not as a protector but as a criminal. Justice, delayed for years, had finally turned its gaze. In the weeks that followed, Daniel struggled to adjust to life outside. Freedom felt strange after years of confinement, but Max was always there, guiding him, grounding him. With every step in the park, every simple walk down a street, Daniel rediscovered pieces of himself he thought were gone forever. The story spread across the world, touching millions. Not because of the corruption, it wasn't the first time justice had failed, but because of the loyalty of a dog that refused to forget. People saw in Max a reminder of what true companionship meant. Standing by someone even when the world says they're guilty, even when the evidence says they're doomed. For Daniel, the journey was more than survival. It was redemption. He had walked into prison branded a criminal and walked out carrying the truth. And through it all, Max had been his shadow, his protector, and his savior. One evening, as the sun set and Daniel sat on his porch with Max curled at his feet, he whispered softly, "You saved me, buddy. Not just from death, but from losing who I am." Max wagged his tail, eyes shining with the same loyalty that had never faded. The message was clear. Loyalty is not just about standing beside someone in good times. It is about fighting silently, faithfully, until the truth breaks through. And sometimes, the greatest detective is not a man in uniform, but a dog who refuses to forget. If you enjoy these stories, make sure to subscribe to Black Battlers so you never miss the next one. Your subscription gives us the power to bring you even more emotional and inspiring stories. Join the Black Battlers family today.